All right. So yesterday I covered performance testing life cycle, and in which we discussed okay. So before starting today's session, can we have some quick assessment, guys? Can someone explain what is performance testing life cycle? What are the different phases in performance testing life cycle, Amitabh?
So we have the RFI and RFP, then we
RFI, RFP. Next, what next? You're on mute, Amitabh.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, I didn't know. So the first step was I think RFI and RFP, like for services companies, we collect the data from them, and then we do the whatever the requirements, we gather those like requirements gathering. Then we create a test plan. Like test leads will always do the test plan, and then we'll start the scripting for the performance testing. Once the scripting is done, then we'll do the review for that scripting, and so after all the review is done and the scripting is proper, then we'll go for the test environment setup, and then we'll do the actual sanity or smoke testing for those. Okay, before while checking the yes, so there was twice sanity, like while the scripting and review, then we'll do for sanity for each script. Then again, after the setup of the test environment, we'll do the sanity and smoke for like for those scripts in the test environment itself. Then we'll do the test execution. Then we'll create the report. We'll create the report. Report can be of two types, like high level report and very in-depth report. And then I think after that we'll just
analysis and requirement.
Analysis and closure sign off.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Like I was thinking like a validation of the application was there.
Sorry.
Then only we'll go for the closure.
Okay. Yeah. So these are the phases in performance testing life cycle. Right. Now let's understand like what are the let's understand one by one. So first, once RFI, RFP is done and a service-based company gets a project, right? They will start with requirement gathering, isn't it? They will start with requirement gathering, and then we'll prepare a test plan document. Once the requirement gathering is done in detail, right? So we'll prepare a test plan document. Okay. So let's see what are the requirements that what will be the requirements that we will be collecting as part of this NFR gathering phase. Right? Now the first and foremost, so requirement gathering can be classified into two types. Requirement gathering can be classified into three types: general, architectural, and business. Okay. So in general requirements, the first and foremost one is what is the current project timeline to begin and close testing activities, right? That is, when is the starting, what would be the starting date, and by what time the project should be completed, right? That is the first and foremost one. And the next one is the application functionality stable, and its functional testing is completed, right? Of course, like, if this is applicable only for if it is a one-time engagement. If the performance testing is a one-time engagement, then only this is applicable. Okay. Otherwise, some performance testing will be done along with functional testing in parallel with the for every sprint, right? So this is applicable only when it is a one-time activity, performance testing. If performance testing is a one-time activity.
Sorry for interrupting. Not like the manual testing is every time we get the build like that. Not like that.
Mostly it will be like that only. I mean, this point is applicable. What I meant to say is this one is applicable if performance testing is a one-time activity.
Okay.
However, most of the projects we will do for every sprint or for every release, like we will be doing performance testing along with functional testing and all. Performance testing also will be done for each sprint. The second point, what I mentioned here, right? This is applicable only when it is a one-time activity. Okay. Is it clear or any confusion?
It's clear.
Clear.
Right. And next one is what are the URL and credentials of the application? Next important requirement is what are the URL, what is the URL and access credentials of the application, right? And any preference on performance testing tools. Does client have any preference on the performance testing tools? Then there are multiple performance testing tools which we discussed previously, right? So these are the major tools. I have listed some major tools over here, which are LoadRunner, JMeter, and NeoLoad. These are the major tools in the market nowadays, right? And next one is what type of performance testing should be performed? Okay, what are the different types of performance testing that should be done for that application? So again, this depends on application to application. We already discussed which type of applications requires testers or which type of applications requires spike test and all. We already discussed that. So based on the type of the application, we will decide like what type of, or we will ask, like we can ask the client like what type of performance testing they are expecting. Okay, here we can suggest like, this application, your application requires not only load test. See, most of the clients know about only load test. Okay, so we have to suggest as a performance test engineer, we may suggest like that particular application requires soak test, right? Soak test, some clients don't know about this soak test or don't perform this soak test. Okay, some clients or some projects, but actually soak test is equally important, right? So apart from load test and soak test, we may need to do stress test and spike test also. So based on the type of the application, we will recommend it or we will suggest it. Okay, and now we have, so the next one is we have observed that in some cases firewall affects the results in load testing. Do we need to get firewall clearance before starting the load testing? Right, now let me explain what is this. What is this firewall case? What is meant by firewall? Before understanding that requirement, right? So first let's understand what is firewall. What is a Windows firewall?
Firewall is a kind of self-defense protection from the devices. Like
right.
From the
yeah, right. So firewall, you can see, read it over here, right? Firewall, Windows Defender firewall can prevent hackers or malicious software from gaining access to your PC through the internet or a network, right? So it will help prevent it will help to prevent hackers or malicious software from gaining access to your PC, right? So in the same way, this is Windows Defender firewall for my PC. So in the same way, you'll have similar kind of firewall for an application as well, right? Now, when you are doing a load testing, right? When you start load testing, right? It may be assumed that there is someone is trying to access or some. And so when we do a load test, right? So there will be too many requests sending from one machine to the application, isn't it? When you are testing an application, when we are simulating multiple users and all, there will be thousands of requests, lakhs of requests hitting the server. So in that case, firewall may block those requests. So we have to ensure if we need to get any firewall clearance as such before starting the load test. Okay. So what do they do in this stage is they will whitelist the IP addresses of our test environment, right? They will whitelist the IP addresses of the test environment over here as part of this firewall clearance. Whitelist means they will accept any request that is coming from that particular IP address. Okay, we'll discuss that in detail when we go to the test executions. We'll discuss that in detail, right? And next one is what are the goals of performance testing activity? What are the goals of, means what is the objective of doing performance testing, right? Whether it is to evaluate the system against performance criteria or discover what parts of the system perform poorly and under what conditions, and compare. These are just some examples that I gave here. So we need to ask the client like what is the objective, what is the main objective that they came for performance testing. Clear? So if they already face some issues, performance issues, right? So we can focus more on that by getting this requirement, right? By getting the response for this requirement, right? But this question, right? if client has already having some performance issues, right? We can focus more on that first. Clear? So we can ask like, what are the goals of performance testing activity? So I'll share a requirement gathering questionnaire to you. Right. So this is a sample NFR document, yes. Sample performance testing requirements document. And you can mention your company name here. The service-based company goes here, name goes here. All right. Now, so I have classified, into 3 types here. So this is the question and this is the client response, right? So I'm just sharing some examples, like you can, so that the response will be something like this, right? In the client response. And now if you observe here, first I have, started with client requirements and then architectural requirements and business requirements. Okay. Now let me, and observe here. So what is the first and foremost requirement? What is the URL and test cadences of the application? Is the application functionality stable and its functional testing is completed? Any preference on performance tools and so on. So you'll have whatever you have in the slide deck, right? So more or less you will have the same things over here. So you can share this document to the client and client has to mention his response. Client has to revert it back with his response. What is the URL and credentials? And for all these questionnaire. Okay. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So in the same way, you have architectural requirements under technology. What type of application it is. So we'll go to the slide deck. Okay. Right. And what will be the acceptance criteria for each performance test? What is the acceptance criteria? Okay. So I already mentioned some acceptance criteria, isn't it? I think I have already explained a few performance criteria in one of the previous sessions. So here it is. I gave some examples of acceptance criteria, right? Now you have to ask what is the acceptance criteria for their application, for the application that we are testing. Okay. Yeah, here you go. What will be the acceptance criteria of each performance test? Okay. And describe the performance testing services that you are looking for. Means what type of testing you are expecting, right? Are you expecting, so company name goes here. Are you expecting us to conduct loads, tests, and soap testing, right? And we are giving a short description because the client may not be knowing like what is load testing, what is test testing, and what is soap testing. They may not be knowing about performance testing, right? If they are already doing performance testing, they will know that obviously. So however, like some clients don't know, may not be knowing what is load testing, what is meant by stress testing, and what is soap testing. So we are giving a short description of each of them over here. And did you conduct any performance testing for the application under scope in the past? If yes, can we have the performance report of the same, right? We can ask like if they conducted any performance testing previously, we can ask the performance test report to provide us the performance test report. Right. And next question is, please provide key milestone details like code freeze, SIT deployment, UAT deployment, go live date. Right. And is the application available? Will be available over the internet or intranet? Is it possible for us to access the system? Right. Guys, this is a placeholder case. Okay. This is a placeholder. I will do one thing. I'll mark all these placeholders in yellow color so that you'll understand that this has to be changed. Right? And SLAs. So industry standard for any transaction to complete is 3 seconds. Do you foresee any business transaction to take more than 2 to 3 seconds? And do you have any business justification for that? Means we are saying that the industry standard response time SLA is 3 seconds. Do you have any transactions which are taking more than 3 seconds? Okay. For example, reports will not take more than 8 to 10 seconds. So reports will not be, you cannot see, for example, if you are using a net banking application or you are using Amazon or Flipkart, right? So when you're using, in case of net banking application, you may be downloading an account statement, isn't it? Which is a time consuming task. Account statement will be generally taking, it will not be completed mostly in 3 seconds. It will take some 5 to 10 seconds like that. So we are asking if there are any such such transactions which take more than 3 seconds, which are expected to take more than 3 seconds, and what is the business justification for that? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
The next type of requirements are business requirements. So business requirements, the first and foremost one is what are the critical business flows of your application that requires performance testing, right? Do you have list of key critical scenarios that require testing? If not, would you like us to identify the critical scenarios during the engagement? And how many critical scenarios can be taken for this engagement? So mostly client will be providing the critical business flows here. So sometimes what happens is client will ask you to identify the critical business flows. See, if they are doing performance testing for the very first time, right? So you need to educate the client like what is why performance testing is important, what are the different types of testing, right? Generally, functional testing will be done for all the test cases. It will cover each and every corner of the application, isn't it? When you do functional testing, right? Number of test cases will be in hundreds, yes or no?
Yeah, almost even
Yes.
more
So
than that.
whereas so number of test cases for functional testing will be in hundreds, whereas number of critical business flows for performance testing will be in tens only. Average number of scripts in a project will be 10 to 20. That's it. It will not be more than that for any application. Okay, generally for most of the applications, average number of performance test scripts will be 10 to 20 only. Okay, why? Because we test only critical business flows of the application. What are the important business flows which are having more user load as well as more visibility to the management, right? Some critical business flows, some business flows may be visited, for example, there is a dashboard kind of thing, right? Those dashboards will be visited by the stakeholders. So let's say, right? Stakeholders will be like 5 to 10 people or 20 people or 30 people, not more than that. But still we will include that because it's the stakeholders, are important. Understood, guys? Stakeholders of that organization, they are important, right? So whatever pages they visit, they should be faster. They should not be having performance issues. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Right? And what is the total user base of the application? Means what is the normal user load of the application? And what is the average and peak concurrent users? Okay. In case concurrent user information is not known, please provide below information for calculating the same. What is that information? See, they may be knowing the normal user load. Okay. However, so they may, in case concurrent user information is not known, right? We need to understand what is meant by concurrent user load. Means at a time, how many users will be accessing the application, right? At a time, how many users will be accessing the application, right? So if that information is not known, right? So if they provide this information, visits per hour, visit length, or page rate, means pages per hour, number of pages in a scenario execution duration. If they provide these details, right, we can calculate that. We can calculate what is the user load required. I'll share you an Excel sheet wherein we can do this calculation by getting this page visits. If you have the page visits and these details, right, we can apply a formula and we can calculate those. What is the concurrent user load? What is the user load required for for that particular application? Okay, so I'll share one Excel sheet. Okay, 1 second. Let me. Right. So this is one of the Excel sheet that I used in this project previously, like long back, of course. So this is a healthcare application, US healthcare application. Basically, like when we worked on that project, right, for that application, that is the first time that they are doing performance testing. They don't know anything about performance testing, or they don't know any of these, like what are the critical business flows, what is the user load for each business flow and all. Client is not aware of at that time. This is way long back, guys, into almost 2007 or 8. Okay, that we use this one, right? nowadays, like everyone, all the clients are familiar about performance testing, and most of them are doing that, right? And now this, you can use this, this sheet to calculate the user load, required virtual users. However, if you want this to calculate this one, right, we need to get this information at least: page views per hour, sleep time, and average response time. So if client is able to provide these, right, so we can calculate the what is the target user load that we have to test the application with. So this is what we use a calculation. So it simply uses a formula over here. Here you can see the formula, right? This required virtual users uses this formula. And if you provide these three values, it will automatically calculate this. And this is bandwidth calculator, of course, not required. Okay, not that important. Right? This is so if client doesn't have that information, like what is the concurrent user load means home. So client doesn't have that information, like what is the user load distribution. Okay. If you remember, I explained some critical business flows of any application. Yeah. So let's say you are you got a client or you got a project from a travel application like this, right? And like they provided what are the critical business flows. Let's say what are the critical business flows, but they don't know, like and let's say, for example, if the target user load for this application is some 50,000 users, 50K virtual 50K users, sorry. Normally, let's say 50,000 is the target user load for their application. However, suppose they don't know out of these 50,000 users, how many will be doing user registration. Maybe like some 1,000 users maybe get, like 1,000 is also big number, right? Let's say, for example, yeah, okay, let's take 1,000 users. Means there will be 1,000 users who will be doing user registration daily. Okay. And book ticket, this will be having more number of users, right? So let's say 40,000 users do book ticket booking. Some print ticket, let's say, for example, like 2,000 users do that, right? So we need these numbers also, like how many users will be using each business flow. That information is also important for us, okay, to simulate the real world scenario, right? So we need that information also. So if they cannot provide that information, right? So we can ask this data. Which data? Just now I have shown you something, right? Page views per hour means how many users visited user registration page, right? Per hour, how many users visited user registration page. So based on these numbers, right, we can calculate the user load. Understood or no?
Can you repeat that one more time, sir?
Okay. Simply ignore it. Okay. So if the client doesn't know how many users each business scenario will have, right? I'll share this Excel sheet with you. You can calculate that. But you need this information from the page views or pages per hour, right? Number of pages in a scenario execution duration. All these are details should be provided by the client, and you can apply some formula. You have some online tools as well. So you can apply that and you can calculate that. However, most of the clients will provide this information. How many users will be each business flow will be having. That information will be provided by the client. This information. So how many users will be doing user registration per day? How many users will be booking ticket? How many users will be doing print ticket, right? And how many users will be doing search availability of tickets, right? All this information will be provided by the client, right? So they will have a separate team called business analyst team. They will be able to provide if they are doing performance testing for the first time. Still, like their business analyst team will be having those details.
Sir, every day is checking, sir.
But no need to check every time. No need to check every day.
Okay.
They will take some latest numbers, whatever they have. So business analyst team will be, that is the job of business analyst team. So how many users will be accessing each page and all, so that these numbers, business analyst team should be able to provide these numbers.
Okay, thank you.
And what is the average and peak load in terms of user transaction per minute? What is the average and peak load? Right? And what is the network throughput between client and the server? How many transactions has to be targeted by a single user? Right? So whatever information they have, they will provide it to us. So it's not that, every question is, like client may not be able to provide response to some of these questions. So whatever information they have handy, they will be providing that. Rest of the requirements, if you don't have too much of requirement information, right? So you have to set up call and you have to discuss and with the client, and you have to derive the response from them, right? The next type of requirement is architecture requirements or technology requirements. So what falls under these requirements is what type of application is it, whether it is a web-based application or a mobile app or a client server application, right? And in which technology or platform the application is developed, right? So we have multiple languages for developing the application, right? So it may be Java, or it may be .NET or PHP or Silver, right? Or SAP and so on, right? So what is the purpose of this information, asking this information, right? So once we start the project, right, we should be having the right resources, right? Suppose, the application is a SAP application. We should be having at least one or two team members who are good in SAP testing, or who already have some prior experience on SAP testing. If it is a GUI, if it is SAP GUI testing, is I'm saying. If it is a SAP web application, that's fine. It is like any regular web application. But if it is a SAP GUI application, right? You know what is one difference between GUI and web application, right? Yes or no? So SAP GUI means a desktop application or a thick client application. SAP GUI means. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
And what are the different technologies at the back end? What is the database? That is, what is the underlying database? If it is Oracle or SQL Server or DB2, etc. And what is the communication protocol used for communication between client and the server? We have multiple protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, SOAP, REST, and all this, Citrix, and all this, right? So we should ask, like, what is the communication protocol between the server and the client, right? When I say client here, it can be browser as well. If it is a web application, right, client will we use browser as a client, isn't it? We use any browser as a client. If it is a web application, if it is a desktop application, right, we install the client, whatever, let's say Zoom client, you install Zoom client, isn't it? So that is called as client here. The desktop application, whatever we install, right? So this is called client here in case of thick client applications. But if it is a web application, right? If it is a web application, like browser would be the client. Browser would be termed as client here. Is it clear or no? Client means if it is a web application, browser is the client, right? So what is the communication protocol between client and the server? And what are the different technologies at the client end? At the client end means on the browser side, what are the different technologies like AJAX, Simple Web, Flash, ActiveX, Silverlight, etc. And what is the middle tier? How is the middle tier developed and all this? So we'll share this, you'll share this requirement NFR document to the client, and whatever information they have, right? They are supposed to gather all the information if they don't have, right? So they will provide that information, whatever response they have over here in the client response column. So you have to analyze that and you have to prepare a test plan document. Clear, guys? I'll share this document with you. Okay. This is too exhaustive list actually, right? So I'll share some one more simple document which contains very important requirements that we need to gather. Okay. And this is for mobile specific performance objectives. What type of mobile app it is, web or native or hybrid, any request being sent on secure channel using HTTPS, right? So this is very in-depth document, guys. So I'll share you one simple document as well for this requirement gathering. I should be having some Excel sheet, which is having the important requirements that we need to gather. Okay. I'll share both of these, like you can use whatever you want based on the application, based on the client. All right. Right. You'll have the almost the same questions here, guys. So this is this is the minimum requirements that you need to gather. Whatever you have in this, right? So in this PPT, right? These are the minimum non-functional requirements that we need to gather. What type of application it is, in which technology the application is developed, right? which database is used for the application, and which application server is running with the system, right? What is the communication protocol, any encryption used for sending and receiving a request or response, right? And any captcha used in any of the in-scope business flows, right? Important thing to discuss. Any captcha used in any of the in-scope business flows. What is captcha, guys?
Capture is nothing but
You
secure.
know captcha, right? So most of you might have used this here in banking or HDFC net banking. Mostly these captchas we will have it in the banking sites mostly, right? So this is image captcha, isn't it? This is image captcha. So, and like you cannot handle this image captcha with the script actually. You cannot handle this image captchas with the help of performance test scripts. Okay. So we have to ask if any of the business flows contain these captchas. I mentioned it here. Captchas cannot be handled with the scripts. So we need to get it disabled or removed or made static in the test environment. Either we need to get it disabled, right? Remember, we can get this in the test environment. Okay. Obviously, in production environment, they will not disable it, or they will not remove it, or they will not make it static. That's not required for us also. So we'll be doing performance testing in the test environment. So in the test environment, we can ask the client to disable those captchas or remove them or make them static. Static means like captcha doesn't change every time if this is made as static. Clear? Because we cannot handle these with the help of scripts because these are images actually. These are not actually not a text, but these are image captchas. Right? So all these net banking applications have these captchas, right? Most of the net banking applications have these captchas, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Even if you take IRCTC also, it will also have some captcha, isn't it? When you log into IRCTC also, you'll have this captchas, isn't it? Login, yeah. So you'll get some captcha over here, isn't it? See, type in the box below. This is the captcha here, right? And most of these, captchas will be image captchas actually. That's why we cannot handle this in the scripts. So we should get them disabled. We should ask the client to disable them, right? These are the important requirements NFR base. These are fall under architectural requirement. A few more under architectural requirement. What are the LAN and WAN details, bandwidth, load balancing, which load balancing technique they are using? What is this load balancing? You remember that you saw it somewhere before? Did you know this? Did you come across this term, guys, in the training? Load balancer, anywhere? Guys, are you with me? Why do we see? Load balancer comes into picture whenever you have more than one server, one web server, more than one app server, or more than one DB server. So first of all, why do we need more than one web server? If one server is unable to handle the user load, right? All the user load. Let's say like there are lakhs of users for some application, and one server is not sufficient to handle the user load. Then they will add some more users to the stack, and you will have, whenever you have more than one web server, right? There should be some mechanism to route the user request to all the servers, to distribute the user request between all the servers. And load balancer, we discussed that load balancer when I explained this 3-tier architecture. And there are different load balancer algorithms. Okay. You just need to ask what is the load balancer algorithm that they are using. That's it. Okay.
Hello.
Yes. So they unit, yeah. So load balancing technique. What is the load balancing technique that they are using? And when does batch transactions happen? And what is the disaster recovery mechanism? Right? So we need, this is some of the information that we need to get from the client, right? And are there any known issues in the application, right? if there are already if there are any identified performance issues, if the client already experienced any performance issues, and if they are, if they have documented that, right, so we can ask them to provide those. For example, memory leaks, high CPU and memory consumption, unexpected growth in daily visitors, more response time which leads to timeout error and all this. So we can ask the client if they already identified some performance issues. Okay. Yes, someone is asking something.
Hello, sir. One small doubt.
Yes.
Sir, some users are provide the IRCTC from, for example, open, sir. Why need the captcha? Why is it used for, sir?
Okay, you mean to ask what is the purpose of captcha?
What use of why, sir?
Okay. Okay, first, what is the purpose of captcha is just to, to avoid, see, if this captcha is not there, right, you can do some performance testing on the IRCTC application, right? So, or, you will have you can have some scripts to run on the application. You can develop some scripts to run on the application. Okay, so to avoid those, those things, or to confirm that, a human user is using that, they do this captcha validation. They use this captcha for that validation.
Okay, thanks.
So otherwise, we can develop some performance test scripts on this, and we can run our scripts, when there is some lot of load, right? If someone is running scripts on this application, that will be additional load on the application, isn't it? So that's why, to avoid those, or to just make sure that it's a real user who is trying to access the application, they use this captcha. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
Right. Next. So these are architectural requirements. Few more architectural requirements. So do you have any traffic monitoring tool deployed on the web server? Example, Google Analytics or New Relic. These are traffic monitoring tools. Means how many users are hitting, at per hour, and all these details, statistics will be collected by this traffic monitoring tools. So we can ask whether, because if they already have some traffic monitoring tools, right? This will help us to understand how the user load behavior. At what time there will be more load on the application, at what time there will be less load, right? So if there is peak load, what is the peak load? If there is some maximum load on the application at a particular time, at what time it is having maximum load, or how many times in a day we have maximum user load. So that information we can get it from this traffic monitoring tool. And for a web application, is there any dependency on the client browser version? So some applications will be supported by some browsers only, right? So you see, like, this application best works in so and so browser. You see some notification like that, right? Have you ever seen that this application works best in Chrome browser, or this application works in Edge browser and all, right? So we have to ask if there are any dependencies on the browser version. A dependency on the browser and browser version. Okay. Right? And will you provide a separate test environment to do a performance test run? Whatever important requirements, right, I have highlighted in bold. Observe here. This is one of the important requirement as part of architectural requirements. Will you provide us a separate test environment to do performance test run? Right? Why? Because it's strongly recommended that test environment should be separate and identical to production environment. Test environment should be separate means we should have a dedicated environment for performance testing. That's what it means. Separate means no other users should be using that. No other teams, or it should not be used for any other testing like security testing or functional testing and all those. We should be having a separate test environment, and it should be identical to production environment. So what is meant by identical to production environment is, let's say this is your production environment. In production environment, you have 3 web servers, 4 app servers, and 3 database servers, right? So your performance test environment also should be having the same configuration. So then only you will get accurate results, right? Then only you will get accurate results. Clear, guys? Yes or no? You'll get accurate results, whenever, if the test environment is identical to production, then only you'll get more accurate results.
But it is not always the same, right?
No, it will be the same. Mostly it will be the same. And nowadays, right? So we have cloud, after this AWS and GCP came into the picture, right? So previously, when there is no cloud concept, there was no cloud concept. They have to buy these servers, and they have to maintain those servers, test environment servers. So, however, right now, like we have AWS and GCP, which charge on usage basis. Whenever you are using, then only you will be charged, right? So almost all the clients are using cloud. All the projects migrated to cloud, right? And you will be having, a test environment identical to production.
Okay.
Okay. And are there any specific requirements for the input data? So for some applications, we need to enter some credit card numbers or zip codes and all, right? So we need to get all those data also. And will the data expire after some time? Is it time sensitive? Means will the data expire after some time? Or do we need to maintain the data uniqueness? Uniqueness means you cannot enter the same data more than once. So do you have any requirements for the input data, right? And how do the real-time users access the application, whether they will use a web browser or a mobile browser, so that we can align our test accordingly. Okay. We should also simulate the same browsers that most of the users are using, isn't it? If you're testing a mobile app, right? So, or if you're testing a mobile app, right? So you have to use mobile testing environment only, isn't it? Or if you are testing some application, how is it performing in a mobile browser? So you have to align your performance testing along those lines only, right? So first we need to get that information, how the real users access the application. Okay, the next type of requirement is business requirement. As we discussed, right? Business anangane, the first one is, what are the critical business flows of your application? That is the first and foremost one in the business requirements. What are the critical business flows, or what are the performance scenarios of the application? So performance scenarios means, I gave some examples here. I gave Facebook example here, right? So what do we normally do with Facebook application, guys? We log in and view posts, and we add posts, or we share comments, isn't it? We share comments or upload some photos or images, sending image invitations, chatting, etc. These are critical business flows of Facebook application, right? So in that way, each application will have a different critical business flows. Yes or no? If it is a travel application, we'll have book ticket as the critical business flow. Book ticket, canceling ticket, search availability, right? If it is a net banking application, we do mostly fund transfer. Fund transfer is the first important one. Login and check balance is another important critical business flow. So each application will have different performance scenarios or critical business flows. So we can mostly client will provide this information. What are the business flows of their application, and how many users visit their site in 24 hours, right? How do you see the users accessing the application? Whether they sporadically log into the application, or they do login simultaneously, right? See, do they all log in simultaneously? Can you give some example for this? Can you give some example of an application where all the users try to access simultaneously?
When the Tatkal ticket.
Yeah. So some more examples. So for example, when
Great Indian
Book
yes?
My Show.
Book My Show.
Great Indian Festival.
So university applications, when the results are announced, right?
Yes.
Board of
Any sale on Amazon, Flipkart.
Right. So we have to ask this information as well. How do you see your users accessing the application, right? And what is the average user session time on your application? Means how much time a user spends on your application once a user logs in. On an average, how much time they spend on the application? Facebook user average session time is 20 to 23 minutes. It seems. Once a user starts using Facebook, right? On an average, they use for 20 to 23 minutes at a stretch, right? And how many transactions does the end user do per day in the application, right? These are examples, just examples. I used Facebook as an example. That's it. Understood, guys? No confusion, right? No confusion that what is the relationship between our application.
Yes, yes.
Huh? How many transactions does the end user put that day in the application? We're almost close to completion. So there for 2 minutes. Okay, 5 more minutes. And how much important is
We are
this?
getting echo, like we are getting echo. So can everyone go on mute?
Yeah, from one of the participants I'm getting. I'm muting everyone. So please, if you have any queries, so please unmute yourself and you can ask, right? So use the space bar on your keyboard to temporarily unmute. If you want to ask, if you have any queries, guys. Okay. Next one is how much important is the sitting location of your end users? Do they sit in the same location or they are distributed across the globe? Right? So Facebook kind of applications will have users across the globe, isn't it? Yes or no, guys? So Facebook kind of applications will have users across
Users across the globe, yeah.
right? And now, can you give some examples where all the users are located in some one location, one or two locations? Give some examples of some applications whose end users will be located in same location, in one location or two locations.
Particular state government site.
Yeah, particular state government site. Okay. And like if there is a support, for example, we have support teams, right? So for example, you have SBI support or any Flipkart support, for example, right? So their users will be located in some single location, isn't it? Of course, don't consider the work from home scenario now. So previously, like how it used to be is, if there is some supporting team, right? So where all the users will be located, if when the real-time users, if they raise a support ticket, right? So the support team will be located in a single location, right? In single city, one city or two cities, isn't it? So we have to ask, like, how the users will be distributed, how the users will be located, whether they will be sitting in one location or they are distributed across the globe, right? And accordingly, we have to simulate the user load. Suppose if you are testing Facebook application, if you are testing Facebook kind of application, right? You have to simulate the user load from multiple locations. You have to generate load from multiple countries at least, isn't it? Yes or no, guys? Or suppose if you are testing a US application, right? Let's say you are testing a US application. So let's say, like I will take some website like cheapos.com, which is a pure, US application, right? This is the shopping website of, which serves US customers only. Okay. I think this is supports only US customers. So this is one of my previous projects that I worked. So it will, let me see if there are any countries. Oh, right now they expanded to multiple countries. Sorry. See, they're serving a lot of countries. Okay. So let's say, like you have some websites or applications which are limited to US, right? So then you have to test that application from US locations only, US geography only, isn't it? Understood or no, guys? What is the importance of this requirement? Someone said just now, right? Suppose, if you take a state government application, so we have to, if you are testing that state government application, right? If you are right? So let's say you are testing a state government application of Karnataka. So yeah, or any Tamil Nadu or any other state. So we have to generate load from that particular location only, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
It
yes.
doesn't make sense to test it from Delhi or some other, other part of the country, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? So that's why we have to ask this requirement. What is the sitting location of your end users? Right? And next one, do you have set acceptable? This is the last slide on this, guys. Do you have set acceptable maximum transaction complete time? That means these are nothing but SLAs. SLAs means homepage should not take more than 2 seconds. Every application will have certain SLAs like this. Okay. SLAs means service level agreement. I will note it down in your notes. Okay, in your class notes. Yes. Response time SLAs. So first of all, SLA stands for service level agreement. So when the application is being developed, right? So some SLAs will be given to the developers that homepage should not take more than 2 seconds, right? Login should not take more than 3 seconds, something like this. Now we should ask what are the response time SLAs for their application, so that once we do performance testing, we verify whether the response times are within the SLAs or not. If the response times are within the SLAs, well and good, right? Otherwise, we have to find out why, can we fix that? Can we reduce the response time, right? Understood, guys? Let's say login is taking some 7 seconds or 8 seconds, right? While response time SLA is 3 seconds, let's say it's taking actual response time is 7 seconds. Now it's our responsibility to find out why it is taking more time, right? And can we fix it? Can we reduce the response time and make it below SLA, fall below SLA, right? We have to find out, why login is taking 7 seconds, and can we optimize the application performance so that your response time becomes falls within the SLA. Okay, that is why we have to ask what are the response time SLAs. Clear, guys? So that is this point. Do you have set any acceptable maximum transaction completion time? One example that I gave here is system response time should not exceed 5 seconds while retrieving user's order history. Suppose you are trying to look the orders placed that you placed in Amazon or Flipkart, okay? And it has an SLA of 5 seconds. It should not take more than that 5 seconds, SLA. Right? If it is taking more than that SLA, right, we have to identify why it is taking more time. And can we reduce that? Can we reduce and optimize the performance? And can we reduce that response time? Understood, guys?
Yes.
Right. And next, what is the peak load time on the production server? Means at what time there will be peak load on the production, in the production environment. And on peak load, how many users are accessing the system? Okay, on peak load means when you say maximum user load, how many users is that? What is the user load at that point when we have maximum load on the application? Right? So Facebook is accessed by up to 10 million users during peak hours, it seems. At a time, there will be 10 million users during peak hours, right? And most of the users will be using, US users will be using Facebook at 8 p.m. EST, it seems. At that time, the user load is 10 million users during peak hours. And what will be next important one is what will be the workload model. Workload model means for Facebook users, 1 million users can concurrently log in. So this is the user load, the application should support, Facebook application should support. What are those? 1 million users can concurrently log in, 4 million users can view posts, and 1 million can add posts. So this is the expectation from Facebook application. So we should ask, like, what are the application expectations? Like how many users it should support, concurrent users, login should be supported by the application and all, right? So we should ask, like, what is the workload model and how many simultaneous users the application intends to support, right? And are there any time constraints for running the test? The server can be accessed to only outside business hours, right, etc. If you have any time constraints, or can we run the test at any time? Okay. And would you like to share any additional information? So if something is not covered in these requirements, and if they want to share any additional information, that would be the last requirement, right? They can share it in response to this question. So these are the different requirements, non-functional requirements that we gather. So you need to remember, so for someone who is preparing for interviews, right, you need to remember at least 5 to 10. No need to remember all these 33. Just try to remember at least 5 to 10. Okay. And try to remember the important ones, whichever I have highlighted in bold, right? What are the timelines, URL credentials of the application, what type of testing should be performed. I have highlighted some questions in each slide, right? It's enough if you remember those for interview purposes. Anyways, when you are working in a project, right, you will share this, you will share some template, and you will be using some template and you will be getting that information. But those who are attending interviews, you have to remember at least 5 to 10 of this. Let's stop it here, guys, for today. Tomorrow I'll explain test plan document. So once we share this requirement gathering questionnaire to the client, right? So he should provide the response for this. See, I kept a column here called client response. They should give the response for all these questions or most of these questions, right? And once we get the response from these for this requirement gathering, right? We prepare a document called test plan document. Once we get all the requirements, right? We prepare a document called test plan document based on the requirements gathering that we have done and based on the scenarios that we are that client mentioned to cover as part of performance testing. So we need to prepare performance test approach. So we need to prepare a test plan document with all these details, which I will be explaining tomorrow. I'll stop it here, guys, for today.
Thank you.